So food chains and trophic pyramids, show one direct relationship, but food webs kind of show everything. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So here's a food chain from before. This is looking at an aquatic ecosystem. So starting from the sun, our producers, primary consumers, secondary, etc. But what's wrong with this? Well, although it gives you a really great idea of what's happening in the ecosystem, it's not showing you everything. It's really just isolating one way organisms are related to one another. But the problem is that many species are generalist species. And what that means is, kind of as the name implies, they feed generally. They aren't feeding just on one type of organism. This small shark isn't only eating ocean sunfish. It's probably eating a bunch of different organisms. And that's why food webs are kind of superior, or at least a superior tool for understanding ecosystems. Food webs are showing more of those interactions that actually occur in an ecosystem. So for example, our smaller sharks are eating that ocean sunfish, but that's not all they're eating. They're also eating, lancet fish, they're eating squid, they're eating tuna, so they're eating tons of different things. Now, trophic levels still exist, but you can see it gets a little bit more interesting. So first thing, identifying the producers. You might not know what dinoflagellates are or what diatoms are. Now, this image kind of gives you a hint. It has energy from the sun, and producers do that. But even if you didn't have that, you see they're not eating anything. There are arrows from things that eat it, but that's it. So that tells you, okay, they're not eating something. Instead, they must be doing photosynthesis. And organisms can feed at different levels. So let's look at copepods. Copepods are eating these producers, which makes them a primary consumer. I'm going to show you a way to annotate this. So I'm going to put that 1 degree sign, meaning primary consumer. But they are also eating shrimp. Shrimp is a primary consumer because it's eating dinoflagellates and diatoms. So copepods are eating a primary consumer, so they are also a secondary consumer. And so you can see they are in multiple trophic levels. Copepods aren't just stuck to being a primary consumer like we saw over here in the food chain. They actually exist at different trophic levels, and that's okay. It's just a way of identifying, where do they fit in this food web. Yes, they're a primary and secondary consumer, but if we go up to the marlin, mainly the marlin is tertiary and quaternary. Maybe it's just quaternary. You could go through all these arrows and figure it out, but point being, you can fit in many different trophic levels. Now you have this image in your handout, and there's a couple of follow-up questions for it. Essentially, it's taking a look at this food web, and first thing you should do, no matter what food web I give you, no matter what questions I ask you, is figure out the trophic level of every single organism. Once you do that, follow-up questions become a lot easier. I'm going to start labeling this, and then I'm going to let you guys finish labeling it, answer those follow-up questions, and then you can talk with your classmates in the Bio Cafe to see if you got the same things. The best place to start in a food web is with the producers. Now again, maybe you don't know aquatic ecosystems really well. You don't know what diatoms are or what cyanobacteria are. But what we do know is there are no arrows leading up to it, meaning they are not eating anything. So submerged aquatic vegetation, I'm going to give that a P. Cyanobacteria, it's not eating anything, so they must be a producer. And diatoms, they're not eating anything, so they must be producers. And then kind of work your way up in the food web. So copepods are eating a producer, and they're eating this producer. So they're eating two producers, but only producers. So that must mean they are primary consumers. All right, let's take a look at minnows. Minnows, producer, okay, must be a primary consumer. Let's take a look at these snails. So snails are eating a producer, so that automatically makes them a primary consumer. But they don't eat just producers. They eat this vegetation, they eat these diatoms, but they're also eating copepods. Copepods are a primary consumer. So if snails are eating a primary consumer, that must make them a secondary consumer. I can go to the crayfish next. The crayfish can eat the snail as a primary consumer, so that would make the crayfish a secondary. So kind of to show you that food chain, it would be crayfish are eating snails, which are eating the submerged aquatic vegetation. But crayfish could also act as a tertiary consumer, because sometimes they eat snails, which is sometimes a secondary consumer. So that food chain would look like the crayfish is eating a snail, which is eating a copepod, which is eating diatoms. So really the shorthand of what I'm doing is I'm just adding 1 to whatever it's consuming. So the crayfish eats a snail is a 1 and a 2, so automatically crayfish becomes a 2 and a 3. And you can keep doing this. The trout is eating a 1 and a 1, so it's just going to be a 2. So continue doing that with the rest of these consumers and then answer those follow-up questions. Now, what's really great about a tool like this is you can easily see how maybe taking out an organism, so maybe osprey go extinct, or how, if we have overpopulation of trout, we can actually see those relationships and see how does that affect our ecosystem? How are things changing? Which can be incredibly important to us because we as humans eat, especially in this food web, we eat a lot of these things. So how will changing something that maybe we don't eat or don't use, how will that affect us as humans, or really the ecosystem as a whole?